Yeah,
Virginia, welcome to the Big Day Wedding Podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. How are things up in Snowmass today?
Well, it's absolutely stunning here today. It's like 85 and sunny and perfect little breeze. It's beautiful summer weather here. It's really nice.
For people out there listening right now that don't know Colorado very well, Virginia lives in Snowmass, which is in the Aspen area. It's probably one of the, if not the most beautiful part of Colorado. So if you're ever out in Colorado visiting, check it out. If you're ever wanting to plan an epic destination wedding, I would highly encourage it. Before we get going here, I wanted to personally thank you because I don't know if you remember this, but back in 2015, when I first moved back to Colorado, I had my company Majestic down in the Caribbean and I moved back to Colorado. I emailed you for a meeting and you totally took the meeting. And not
Mm.
only did you do that, but you walked me through my website and all of my pricing, and you basically helped me when you didn't need to. And I just want to say thank you for that. It was something that you didn't need to do. And I think that says a lot about you as a person that you took that meeting and helped me. So
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for reaching out, Ben. And I love giving unsolicited feedback. So I'm glad that it was valuable.
good. I'll continue
Yeah.
to ask you for feedback then. That's awesome.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
all right. Well, I wanted to dive into what I think is on most couples' minds right now, which is how do I plan and or postpone a wedding during COVID-19?
Mhm.
But I know that you had something that you wanted to say first regarding Black Lives Matter and some of the issues that our country is facing right now.
Definitely. Well, thanks for kind of prompting that. And I think we'd be remiss not to address what's happening in the world right now. And I live, as you said, in Snowmass, Colorado, and Aspen, and it's a complete homogeneous bubble. We are so isolated, and it is an extremely privileged community. And I just think that as we look at what's happening all across the country, we just have to take a moment to recognize and not continue to isolate ourselves. And I think in Aspen we really do. And so what I'm challenging my team and every single person out there is how can we create environments, virtual and real life, obviously safely, for meaningful connections and conversations to continue to educate ourselves and not go and hide in these little enclaves, but actually recognize what's going on in the world, continue to educate ourselves. I have two little kids, as you know, and I take my job as a parent so seriously. And because they're so sheltered here, it's my job more than ever to continue to educate them about the world around in every single way. So, our goal and our hope through the next handful of months and years as we continue this conversation and look at, the injustices and as we go through this process of learning, we want to be positive and we want to bring some light and love and hope and happiness. There's so much judgment and negativity. And for us, we really want this. I feel like I'm not articulating what I'm attempting to say, but we're going to do our best to foster an inclusive event community and foster an inclusive community all around. And we're going to mess it up. We're not perfect, but we're going to be committed to learn and stand up and act. And we just want to encourage everyone to do the same. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to address there before we move on to COVID, because as you know, it's just destroying our industry, but it's also creating some amazing pivots and allowing us to all be more innovative. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think, living in Colorado in such a beautiful place, we do get kind of sucked into this one-dimensional reality, a bit homogenous, if I may say so. So it's really nice to hear your perspective on that, like a zoomed out perspective. And, it really makes things, it really puts things in perspective. So I appreciate your thoughts. So thanks
Yeah,
for that.
of course.
All right, great. Well, let's get into some of this fun stuff about how to plan a wedding during COVID-19. So I think the question that I'm hearing a lot, and I'm a videographer, so I can't imagine how much you're hearing it, is when can I plan my larger, say 100 to 250 person wedding?
Isn't that the $1 million question? Oh, well, as of yesterday, new guidelines, new restrictions are coming out, and every week, every month, guidelines are changing. What we're advising our clients and what we're talking to them about is what type of a wedding do you want to have? Because you can have a 150-person wedding in Pitkin County here in the Aspen area, starting at the end of this upcoming month, actually, is as soon as about 2 weeks from now. But is it going to be the wedding that you want to plan? Is it the wedding that you want to have? And for some people, the answer is yes. And for some people, the answer is no. So when can you plan it? You can plan it now. You can host it now. But is it the wedding that you've been dreaming of? It's the wedding that you want to have. And I know that's kind of a very circular, roundabout answer, but there's no right or wrong. It's really what's right for you as a couple, for your family, and for your guests as you're celebrating.
Could you elaborate a little bit for our guests that don't know some of the guidelines that Colorado Governor Polis has laid out recently?
Definitely. So our social gatherings were restricted, in March, going back to 10 people gatherings. They've gone up to 25 people, and now soon we're at 50. That will continue to expand, but social distancing is required at all events, and events are time of merriment and a lot of, dancing and partying and drinking. And now we are suggesting and requiring that everyone attending event must social distance. So basically that means masks unless you're actively eating or drinking. So if you are dancing, you're wearing a mask. If you're walking to the restroom, you're wearing a mask. All of your servers and team members that are going to be there to support the event, to produce the event, they have to have gloves and masks. They're suggesting that all tables are at least 6 feet apart, and that all seating is done with kind of families that have been quarantined together. So in a way, maybe doing a seating chart is a lot easier than normal, because you can do just family by family or a lot smaller tables. So yeah, it's staggered entrance, tables 6 feet apart, wearing masks, they're trying to suggest that we limit all cocktail hours. So it's really more seating and then people leave. It's more of a restaurant experience as opposed to a traditional event with the party that we've come to expect.
What about if the events take place outside? Do people also still have to wear masks and abide by all of those precautions you just mentioned?
All of the staff is required to, and it is strongly, strongly recommended for guests when they are not eating. I think that people are going to bend those rules a little bit, but it is a requirement, and we'll see what people do.
Yeah. Who do you think?
And with outdoors, I think people that will just have a little bit more space.
Who do you think the enforcement, where do you think the enforcement will come from? So, we have all these restrictions. I'm guessing that people are eating, if they're eating and drinking at their own wedding, mingling with their own guests, they're not going to want to wear masks for the most part. Do you think that will fall on the planners, or will that be the venue, or how do you see that unfolding?
I think it's going to fall most on the venue, unfortunately. We ran into this with a wedding that actually happened 2 days after restrictions went into place, and I called Pitkin County and asked what the guidelines were for if I actually participated, because the wedding was 100 plus people. At that point it was a lot smaller, and they basically told me if I participated in that wedding it would be a misdemeanor and a $5,000 fine. So at that point, had they caught us, as a planner I would have been responsible for enforcing, and I was held responsible for whatever happened at the event. I do think moving forward, I don't think the planners are going to be the person that the counties go after. I do think it's going to be the venues, the biggest liabilities on the venues, especially those that serve the food and the beverage, as opposed to just like a random field that you might rent. Then the liability, I think, and the policing would fall on the caterer.
It certainly seems like the venues would have a lot to lose if they were to risk any of these rules. So they might be the ones that enforce it. So that makes sense to me. Yeah,
definitely.
So hearing that, I assume that a lot of the brides and grooms out there are going to say, wow, I just never envisioned my wedding like that, wearing a mask. So how would you go about communicating a postponement and just some general COVID concerns with wedding guests if you were a wedding couple?
If you were a wedding couple hosting the event or postponing it?
If you were a wedding couple postponing your wedding, how would you communicate with your guests?
Definitely. So we have done it a lot with our clients because most of our 2020 has shifted to 2021. So we've had a lot of involvement with communicating with our guests. And a lot of that has been as soon as we anticipate that we might postpone, we recommend reaching out. Even if you're not 100% certain, we suggest that all clients or all brides and grooms reach out to their guests and say, hey, we want you to know we are taking COVID into consideration. We are contemplating postponing. We will keep you posted because guests are curious, and I don't ever want guests to be overly curious. I think it's an amazing thing to be curious, but not about whether a party's happening or not. So at least give them an indication, yeah, we're thinking about postponing. As soon as you do decide to postpone, and for that, you send out an email, and then you could also put up a note on your wedding website and just say, we are taking into consideration guidelines, restrictions, and COVID in general, and what's the social responsible thing to do. We're contemplating postponing. Once you postpone, you would send out a new save the date, whether it's paper or paperless. We typically would recommend that you send another email, and obviously call key players that don't look at their email. So as over communicate is what we suggest, and acknowledge what's going on, and give them the information as you get it. But even if you don't have information, and I recommend this, whether it's a wedding, birthday party, nonprofit event, I think over communicating is a good thing as it comes to this.
Have you heard of any wedding couples using SurveyMonkey or any of the survey websites to gauge their, guest participation if they're coming to the wedding, and like the qualitative aspect, like you can add comments and things like that? Have you heard of that happening at all?
I have not, but I love that actually.
Yeah, it was discussed in a previous episode. I was like, that's a great idea. So yeah, I was curious. Yeah. How do you think COVID will affect next year, 2021? I mean, I guess that's kind of like a larger philosophical question, but.
I think assuming we have a vaccine and that life is back to our new normal, I think 2021 is going to be insane. I think people are going to be incredibly busy. I think as a bride and groom, you're going to have a lot of competition for vendors. If you're a new couple that wasn't a postponing couple, book as soon as you can and secure all of your key vendors, just because there's going to be so much business next year. And I think it's going to be a really, really busy year, assuming we get back to normal.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are you planning at all to pivot to accommodate for smaller weddings at this point? A lot of people I hear the term now, micro weddings, weddings with, let's say, less than 50 people. Do you foresee, your company pivoting to accommodate those, or are you guys kind of staying the course? And do you see small weddings becoming more of a trend?
I think small weddings are going to become a huge trend. And actually, not to pat myself on the back a little bit, but I was Brides Magazine reached out in 2019 as they're predicting trends for 2020. And one of my trends for 2020 that I predicted was the micro wedding. Obviously, this was way before COVID became part of our day-to-day existence. But I do think there's something amazing about these micro weddings, COVID or non-COVID. It's about the intention. It's about what you're actually doing as opposed to just a big show-off event. So with Bluebird Productions, we are not pivoting to do micro weddings. We are doing them through our little sister company. So last fall, I launched a little sister company, actually. It's called Something Blue by Bluebird. And it's kind of a light but thorough touch, or it's more appropriate for these micro weddings. It's, a fraction of the cost. It uses the systems that we've created over the past 10 plus years. And I think it's perfect for micro weddings. We're seeing a lot of clients this year who are booking us 2 months out or 6 weeks out for basically bonus weddings, where they're getting married on their original date, but they're doing a micro wedding, and then next year they're going to host their traditional big wedding. So I think this year is going to be a big year of micro weddings, and I think moving forward, people are going to realize, wow, that was amazing. And it's such an honor to be a guest at a micro wedding that I think when people who have been guests at micro weddings are thinking about what they're going to do when they get married, I think it's going to be even more impactful.
What's the website for your smaller weddings again?
It's somethingblue.event.
Okay. I filmed a wedding last weekend and it was meant to be 200 people, but they reduced it down to 13. And so this is the first one for me, the first micro wedding, I would say. And it was great. I think they were pleasantly surprised and happy with how it went, because my experience is at a 200 person wedding, you're kind of skimming the surface with your guests. You're
Completely.
having little quick conversations with them. Your head is spinning. The day goes by really fast. That's universal feedback I always get. The day went by so fast. That's why we always recommend getting a video. But at this wedding, it was their closest family and friends. They got to spend plenty of time with them, meaningful conversations. So I can definitely see the value in this. I think COVID certainly expedited it, but I can definitely see the value in these smaller weddings.
Well, both my brother and my sister actually did micro weddings, and this was, oh goodness, 8 years ago. We actually all got married the same year. My brother got married in January, I got married in April, and my sister got married in October. And I was so jealous because I wanted a tiny wedding, and we ended up having this large wedding because that's what Jeff wanted. But I think there's something so amazing and intimate and authentic about having this experience with your absolute nearest and dearest. And yeah, great, go through like an amazingly fun party afterwards. But if you're thinking about the significance and the step that you're actually taking, it's so much more closely aligned with a micro wedding, as opposed to these 250 person affairs, which again, I love. We can produce and they're amazing and we can get super, super creative, but it's really what's right for the couple. But I will always have a sweet spot for micro weddings.
I'm curious if people will start breaking them out into almost two separate events, like you kind of just hinted at, the micro wedding and then just like a larger party at a space with your friends.
Well, there was a new phrase that came out today, we do redo. We do redo. And like this year, it's the people who are getting these who are doing an elopement or a micro wedding on their original date, and then they get their redo wedding next year. So
I like it.
Fun.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I like it. I'd like to shift to talk a little bit more about the financial aspect of postponing, some of those brass tacks. What are some of the costs associated with postponing, and how have most of the vendors that you work with handled that?
I think we're seeing answers across the board. I think in general, we're seeing a lot of our vendors shift no penalty, and we're seeing a lot of vendors charge a 20% surcharge as a displacement fee, a scope of work change. So I think for a lot of clients, they're going to see an increase in the cost of their wedding for postponing it. Again, not all vendors. A lot of the bands that we're working with do have displacement fees. We, through Bluebird Productions, we're doing a 20% postponement / scope of work change, because for our full service clients with Bluebird, we have so much more work. Postponing and changing a wedding for a client, it takes my team about a month to get, all 20 plus vendors, all the puzzle pieces put back together, then try to negotiate to make sure we're not paying a lot of additional postponement fees. It's a fair amount of work. So I'm seeing, again, some bands change. Most of the photographers are not charging postponement fees. Most floral are not. But there are other financial ramifications in terms of just supply chain. And if you think about the floral industry, what's going to happen with the cost of flowers next year? So this year, there's been a big impact on all the flower farms. They haven't had the staffing. And there have also been some other, just bizarre environmental things that have killed a lot of crops. So I do think people who are postponing are going to have, if it was I'm throwing out a number, but like a $10,000 floral contract, next year it might be a $15,000 thing to get apples to apples, just because cost of product changes. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, no one wants to make anyone spend any more money, but a lot of work goes into a postponement, and we can never predict what some of the hard costs are. So most clients postponing are facing some sort of a penalty financially.
It makes sense to me that you as a planner will charge a postponement fee because you're doing more work. And then it also makes sense that for photographers and videographers like myself, they're not charging, because other than, redoing the contract, we really haven't done any work up until that point.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about the bands because I would put them in that same category. So it's interesting to say that to hear you say that they are charging, or some of the bands are charging a fee. What about venues?
Most of the venues we've had the opportunity to work with have been incredibly flexible and accommodating. One or two that are very, very corporate started out with incredibly strict postponement / cancellation policies, and most people have completely relaxed those. So it's been very nice. I think people have changed their tune a lot from beginning of March until now, which today's June 16th. So over the last couple of months, how people have handled postponement has really changed. People took a lot harder of a line and have softened, which is smart. It's better to start a little bit hard and then loosen up and be the nice guy as opposed to become the mean guy.
I feel like you could almost learn a lot about a person or a business by how they've handled the situation and their policies regarding some of this stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. This is a technical question. I get the question sometimes, or I've had the question so far throughout COVID-19, is my postponement or cancellation considered a force majeure event? Have you had that question? And do you have any insight into that? I guess it's almost more of a legal question.
We get that question all the time, and
Okay.
I've talked to my lawyer about it a lot.
Okay.
And if you think of as a planner, we're dealing with between 10 and 20 contracts per wedding. Every contract has a different force majeure clause or a limitation of liability clause, and whether the client is covered or not by force majeure really depends on how the contract is structured. Because a lot of times a venue or a vendor could actually do the wedding. And if the contract doesn't specifically say pandemic and a wedding could still occur, technically they're not going to be covered under force majeure. So say I wanted to throw a micro wedding right now, I could do that and it wouldn't be a force majeure because those are permitted based on, our guidelines and restrictions in the state of Colorado. If I wanted to throw a 250 person wedding right now, depends on how the contract's written, because most contracts aren't written to describe the scope of the event. I would guarantee you that like your contract would have a wedding of, X couple, X date, this location, but you're not addressing the size and scope. So you technically as a vendor could then come to the client and say, look, I can still perform. I understand it's not the wedding you want, but I could still film your wedding today or tomorrow or in 6 months, regardless of what the restrictions are. So there's a lot of gray area, unfortunately, and that's kind of what we've been struggling with. And, I can understand it from both perspectives, from the client's perspective saying, look, I want to have a 250 person event and I can't do it. So a lot of contracts have shifted and will now say, and I would recommend in any of our clients moving forward, I'm asking for us to put the scope of their target and ideal event in, as opposed to just saying wedding of, because a wedding of Jane and Joe Smith could happen. It's just not the wedding that they want. And so how do you define the scope and how is that covered in force majeure? Does that make sense?
It does. There is a lot of gray area. And just for our listeners out there, disclaimer, Virginia nor I are attorneys. So this is
not a lawyer.
Obviously just our perspective and our take on it. So definitely consult someone with some actual legal experience. But no, that does make a lot of sense to me. But that is a question that we get as well. So thanks for your take on that.
Yeah, I think the hotels have been the hardest on that originally, and saying, well, look, we can still provide hotel rooms. So some of our room block contracts, and they could. So, for a lot of our clients, we do a contracted room block. So we guarantee 20 rooms, 40 rooms, 60 room nights. And it's tied to a wedding, but how now the wedding's not happening, they're still bound to that contract because the hotel can actually still provide those rooms. So unless a restriction were to close the hotel, if the restrictions close the hotel, then they would be required to give a deposit back. Otherwise, they're technically not required to. It's really out of the kindness of their heart. Yeah.
We touched on this earlier a little bit when you're talking about the flowers and the floral business, but do you think any vendors, we get the question, will any of my vendors go out of business next year, by next year, if my wedding is in 2021?
Oh, it's such a hard question, and it's so sad, truly, because I have already seen that a couple of companies go out of business, and I think in part it's um, timing to make an exit if you were contemplating an exit already. I know it's also been, I mean, financially devastating for so many of these small businesses. I mean, Bluebird included, we were very fortunate to get the PPP loan, but that's only a couple of months. Um, and I think this is one of the areas where, as a planner, I have an opportunity to educate our clients. When they say, well, why should I give this person more money? They might go out of business next year. Why should I pay them? You know, we postponed. Let's renegotiate the terms of our contract. I'm not going to pay them anything. So we just talk, do you want to help float them? Do you want to keep them around? Because if they have zero income for the year, do you think that you're going to have this amazing vendor or not? And some people can go 14 months without any business, but the majority of people can't. And so we really talk to our clients on a case by case basis. Larger companies we're a little less concerned about, but some of our smaller, more one-off, I really kind of will appeal to our clients and say, you know, I'll use my judgment based on my knowledge of of the particular vendor's business, their business model, how long they've been in business. I think it's definitely harder for some of the newer businesses as well. So it's relatively vague, but I do think we're going to have a lot of businesses that either decide, I don't want to be in this industry and this is a great exit, or two, financially, they can't go a year plus without income and they don't have vendor or they don't have clients who are willing to pay them and float them for the year. You know, one of the conversations I have with our clients when we talk about the postponement and displacement fee, I really talk about the quality. We are very much a team. It's a team of vendors, but it's also the team of girls at Bluebird. And I want to keep my staff. And we have no weddings basically this year for Bluebird. We're in the process of postponing our last one. And to guarantee that we can produce phenomenal weddings next year, I need to keep my staff on for a year. And if my clients don't pay me until end of 2021, I'm not in a position to keep the staff on. And as soon as I start to explain that, they say, oh my God, yeah, you're right. You know, Bluebird's only as good as the people that have been there. And if you have all new staff, you're going to do an okay job. But we want your experienced staff. And so we understand. It's really appealing to humanity, I think.
No, that's great that they understand that you know we're small businesses too. I mean, people are struggling, but small businesses are really struggling as well. So
Yeah, and it's very sad because we will have some people exit. And then also this has provided a lot of opportunities for some of these small businesses to pivot, you know, the rental companies to do rentals at the hospitals. I know that we're seeing a lot of that where you would assume that they have no business. And actually that's a very common question. Will the rental company go out of business because they can't provide rentals this year? Well, they actually can. They're just not providing it for parties. They're doing, you know, stanchions and chairs and tables for other, like whether it's a community gathering or a government gathering, people just think, oh, they are a rental company, they're going to provide tables, chairs, plates for my wedding. There are many other opportunities and areas and outlets for them.
yeah, hopefully they've already established those connections and have that business going by at this point, or else I'm guessing it would be a struggle.
Yeah.
I see the freelancers, I think, will be in better shape. The people with like brick and mortar costs, I think those are the ones that are probably at more risk.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd want to communicate with a couple that is planning their wedding in the next 12 to 18 months?
I think flexibility is the name of the game, and realizing that as much as we want to control everything, and as a planner, we are control freaks and we want to control the experience for our clients. Clients need now to be more flexible than ever and just kind of go with the flow and let go and remember what the wedding is truly about. And we kind of touched on this with micro weddings, but what is the wedding about? Is it about the celebration of a marriage and families coming together and friends coming together, or is it about the party? And kind of get very clear on that. And we have a lot of clients who have these rock solid relationships and they're going to get married on their original date, just them at the courthouse, and then they're going to throw their wedding later. And they are able to kind of relax, but that's because they know what they want. And so be flexible. No guidelines are going to change. and be clear. Is it important that I get married on this date? Is it important that I have this amazing party? Or is it important that I just have my nearest and dearest there? And I think that once brides and grooms are clear on like what they're actually doing and why they're doing this, the stress levels will go down a fair amount.
Do you have any suggestions for how they would create that priority list, or do you have any process that you can recommend to them? Because to me, that sounded like it's just a matter of creating your priorities almost.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's a conversation that the bride and the groom need to sit down and talk and say, why are we doing this? Like, what's important with this wedding? And again, is it a wedding to make mom happy? Is it a wedding to make dad happy so his friends can come along? Is the wedding about, what is the actual wedding about? Not what's the marriage about. And if the wedding is about the marriage, different story. If the wedding is about, the marriage is important, but it's a big party, then it's important to consult the families as well. So start as a couple, define what's important. Obviously, make sure you go talk to mom, dad, aunts, uncles, whoever the key decision makers are, because that has the opportunity, it's going to be a long relationship ahead. You want to make sure all the decision makers are very happy through it. But it's just a hard conversation, because I think a lot of people feel like they should say it's about, just about the marriage, and whatever they decide is fine. It's the marriage, or, all they want is an amazing party. That's great too, but it's having that clarity, and it's hard to take a step back and determine what's the driving factor here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, for Virginia, for coming on the Big Day Wedding podcast. I know there's probably a lot that you need to juggle in the coming months as things change, and I hope you can enjoy the rest of your summer in Colorado.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And I, for one, I'm very excited to have a summer in Colorado. I think a lot of people in our industry, we never get to enjoy summers, right? So it's
I know, this is our summer.
Come on the water. Yeah.
I get to finally get outside in the summer. Yeah.
Well, we recommend so much for what our guests should do at weddings, and now we actually get to go do it. So
it's a great way to look at it. That's how I'm trying to look at it too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. Yeah.
Sounds good. Take care.
Thanks.